Hello and welcome to the video on types of neurons as part of the neuronal communications topic. In this video we're going to be going through the three different types of neurons and the structure and function of each of them. I've drawn a brief diagram of the basic structure of the neurons, so we're going to go through about how these structures are going to be specialised to help in to allow the neuron to perform its function. So we'll just go through initially the function of each of these. I'm aware I've not got much room here. So the motor neuron, they carry the action potential from the central nervous system to the effector, which might be like a muscle cell or a gland or something like that. So that's our motor neurons, from the central nervous system to the effector. Our sensory neurons are neurons that carry an action potential from the sensory receptor to the central nervous system. So sensory receptor to the central nervous system. In our relay neurons, just join the sensory neuron to the motor neuron. So I'm just going to put sensory to motor, and these are the neurons. Okay, I don't know if you can see that. So they're the basics here, and we're just going to go a little bit more at the function. So it's once a stimulus has been detected and its energy has been converted to a depolarization of the receptor on the cell membrane, the impulse must be transmitted to other parts of the body. So what's happening here is the impulse is transmitted along these neurons as an action potential. So the overall role of the neurons is just it's about cell signaling, really. So I'm just going to put that we're just looking at cell signaling. Okay. Right, and then we're going to go on to a lot of the questions about this are comparing them. So we're going to make sure that we're making connections between these three all the way throughout. The structure then of, we'll do the motor neuron first. We have a cell body here, or the soma, whichever one you want to call it. These dendrites I've tried to illustrate to be short, so I'm going to put these that are the short. And the axon here is long. It's a long axon, relatively. If we compare that to the sensory neuron, we have the cell body in the middle of the neuron, so that's here. We've got a longer dendrites. I've not drawn those very well, but they're longer dendrites. So I'm just going to put there longer. And the axon here, so that it's short, but the main difference here is that we have a dendron as well. So the dendron, when you were looking, if this wasn't labelled, we'd be able to tell that this is a dendron because this is much shorter than this here. So the dendrons is the shorter region. And then if we're looking at the relay neuron, can't really see that, can you? We've got our cell body, which is up here. We've got short dendrites here, so I'm going to put that there. Short, I know my diagrams aren't to scale. And we've got a short axon, which it actually looks quite long there. Never mind. If we're looking at the location of the cell body, because usually if we're having a question on location of the cell body, that might be an easy comparison point. So the location of the cell body in the motor neuron, as we can see, and the dendrites actually is in the central nervous system. So location is in the central nervous system. If we're looking at the sensory neuron, we have the cell body and dendrites outside of the central nervous system. They're actually in the peripheral nervous system, so it's in the PNS. And for our really inside the CNS, so its location. And I can't really see that, can you, CNS? The dendrites, they synapse with the receptors here in the motor neuron. Dendrites in the sensory with other neurons, so communicating with other neurons. And these ones are obviously between the sensory and the motor neuron. Another good point of comparison about our neurons is their axons and where they're positioned. So the motor neuron here, we have the axon, it ends in the effector, so the axon ends in effector. Alright, for our sensory neuron, the axons synapse with relay and I'll come back to that one actually. So for the motor neuron, we've got the dendrites connect directly to the cell body. In the sensory neuron, the dendrites don't connect directly to the cell body. Another important point is that the motor neuron it's got no dendron. Whereas we know that the sensory neuron does have a dendron. A motor neuron has a longer axon than the sensory neuron. So this one, the axon is shorter than in motor. The cell body in the motor neuron is at the end of the neuron, and in the sensory neuron it's in the middle. You can see here it's in the middle. And I think that is the majority of when we're comparing the overall structure, and that's about everything. So what I'm going to go on to now is looking at what makes them specialised. Apologies. So specialised. So we have lots of sodium potassium pumps. In fact, I'm just going to put that out. Sodium potassium pumps. They're going to use ATP to actively transport sodium ions out of the cell and potassium in. So sodium ions out. Remember, we've got 3 out, and then 2 are coming in. And actually, because we're going to need ATP for this, it only makes sense that we're going to have many mitochondria to produce the ATP through the aerobic respiration. That's another way in that it's specialised. And then we've got, of course, we've got a myelin sheath. And which is containing our Schwann cells. It's an insulating layer that stops ions diffusing in. So if ions can't diffuse in there, they're going to have to jump from the nodes of Renvia by saltatory conduction, which is more rapid. And they're the main ones really for how it's specialised. And then if we're going to have a look at what else do we need to look at? We've done the functions. Got that the sensory is from the sensory receptor to the central nervous system. Got the relay that is from the sensory to the motor, and we've got the motor that carries an action potential from the central nervous system to the effector, such as a gland. So we've mentioned that the nodes of Renvia speed up the conduction. Yes, right, let me see what else. So I believe that's it for our neurons then. I hope this cleared a few things up. Thank you for watching.